it's also kind of a decision of 10th order importance, I think. It doesn't really matter all that much. What matters is helping create a climate of opinion in which people are willing to do things, that matter a lot more than voting for a candidate. But I think, by and large, the candidacy has been constructive. The media coverage is what you'd expect and kind of plays it down.
No, I was wondering if you could speak on the implications of the Star Wars missile defense hysteria as a component of the rogue state mentality.
That's kind of interesting, and here I think it's not. I mean, the effect of the national missile defense, the new Star Wars, I think there's pretty broad agreement among strategic analysts here and elsewhere. Surprisingly broad agreement, namely that it's very likely to increase the danger of nuclear war and nuclear proliferation, because everyone, Russia, China, everyone else, regards it as a first strike weapon, and correctly. Like if any other country was doing it, we'd regard it as a first strike weapon. In fact, the U.S. has tried to placate Russia by amazingly urging them to put their missiles on launch on warning status, because that says, well, okay, that way you don't have to worry about it. But that's just like total insanity. I mean, see, our missiles are on launch on warning status, and that's bad enough, because that means anything accidental can cause a war. But in the case of Russia, a kind of collapsing economy where the computers don't work and this and that, to have launch on warning status is like insanity. But that's the idea. And now, what's this for? That's an interesting question. And here, I think it's pretty hard to think of a rational answer. My feeling it's kind of like it's a very psychotic country in a lot of ways. It's not a joke. People are scared out of their wits of all sorts of things. Like, say, fear of crime in the United States is way beyond any other industrial country, although crime isn't. Crime's kind of like other countries. But fear of crime is out of sight. Fear of terrorism is much higher in the United States than in countries that really are much more subject to terrorism, which isn't much. And the same has been true with nuclear weapons. Like, I don't know, I have to do some arithmetic, but like when my kids were little, they, maybe you or some, people, they were taught in school to hide under desks. You know this stuff? To protect them from a nuclear attack. I mean, you don't even know what to say, but it's part of the same sense of fear. It's kind of like gated communities. People live in gated communities. Okay, when you do it in San Salvador, you can understand it. The rich are control so much that good reason to be scared. But gated communities in the United States, or people have alarms in their cars. And I live in a suburb, middle class, professional middle class suburb. I mean, there's a police force, but I think the most it does is find lost parrots or something. I mean, nothing ever happens in a place where. But there are alarms going off all the time. People have alarms in their houses. The cars all have alarms. Actually, our house, once there was a break-in at our house, and the police came, and they told us, look, yeah, we know who it is. It's local kids. They've got rich parents. We can't do anything about it. We know them, and they're not causing much harm. They're looking for drugs. And in fact, the only place they went to was the medicine cabinet, see if there was anything there. We asked afterwards, look, is there something we ought to do? So the cop who was there, he kind of laughed. He said, look, if you want, you can spend a lot of money and get an alarm system which will have lasers going all over the place, and it'll send an alarm to the police station in case any of those things go. But he says, you're just wasting your money. We don't pay any attention to any of those things, because we know they're all false alarms. There's nothing that's ever going to happen in this town. But nevertheless, everybody has them. And of course, they go off randomly because all sorts of things. People forget to turn a key or whatever. Well, all of this is some kind of atmosphere of tremendous fear, and I have a feeling that the national missile defense is part of this. There's just tremendous fear that they're out to get us. Now, why such fear? Well, it may have to do with being the biggest thug on the block. I mean, in a sense that maybe somebody is going to try to get us, and maybe has reasons. But whatever the motives, I think they really have to be sought in this kind of sort of irrationality which pervades the whole society. It's a very frightened society. It shows up in lots and lots of ways. I mean, for example, the belief that aliens are among us. I don't remember the last numbers, but it's extremely high in the United States, and almost, nothing anywhere else. There are all kind of measures like this in which the United States is kind of off the chart, and it's worth thinking about. But I suspect it's, in a sense, a kind of cultural phenomenon more than a, political or economic one in this case.
Except for the role of like weapons contractors.
Yeah, the weapons contractors like it, and high tech likes it. It's another way to put money into high tech. But you can do it in less dangerous ways than that.
So I think you made some connections between structural justice programs in third world countries and situations in low-income neighborhoods. Is that just a symbolic connection?
No, it's a real connection. I mean, the United States, and in fact most of the industrial world, like Canada and so on, have been subjected to a kind of structural adjustment over the last 20, 25 years, same period. Meaning cut back in social spending, privatization, opening of, there isn't much in the way of opening of borders because they're pretty open ones anyway. Freedom of financial flows. I mean, these are all aspects of structural adjustment, and they've been applied in the United States since the late Carter years.
Under what name or what color?
It's the name of economic freedom or some such thing. I mean, whatever it's called. It's what people call neoliberalism. In the United States, that word isn't used. Everywhere else it's used. Here it's called a free market. It's not a free market. No. I mean, the United States is about as remote from a free market as you can imagine. Almost every dynamic component of the economy relies crucially on the state sector. We have a huge state sector of the economy. Almost everything comes out of it. Often it's under the cover of defense. But like Alan Greenspan gave a speech a couple of years ago to newspaper editors, which was kind of an interesting speech. He's, big honcho and very respected economist. He was praising the American entrepreneurial spirit that leads to our free market economy and all its wonderful achievements. And then he listed examples. And the examples that he listed are textbook cases of state-produced technology. I mean, computers, internet, telecommunications, right down the list. Every one of them comes straight out of the state sector. Like where I work at MIT, everybody knows this, except maybe the economics department. I'm not sure. Because that's where it pays our salaries. You can't fail to know it. I mean, MIT is part of the funnel by which the public takes the risk and costs of the development of advanced industry, and then if anything works, you hand it over to the private sector. The one example he mentioned that isn't obviously like this is transistors, which is an interesting case. That's the one case that doesn't come straight out of the state sector. But transistors themselves are interesting. Transistors were produced in a private lab, invented in a private lab, Bell Labs. But that was during the period when AT&T had a monopoly. So that means it's a tax on the public. If you're a monopoly, you can tax the public for whatever you feel like doing. So they taxed the public to set up a really great research center. I used to go there all the time. The research center ended as soon as the monopoly ended. But during that period, they did all kind of things at public cost, because it's a monopoly. So yes, it was technically private, but it was supported indirectly by taxes. Furthermore, they used wartime technology, which comes from the state sector, and procurement was from the government. For the first 10 years of production of transistors, around 1948 to 1958, all sophisticated transistors, 100% of them were bought by the government. Well, okay, that's the period in which they went through what's called the learning process, figuring out how to make the things cheaply and well enough so you can market them. Yeah, so that's the one case that wasn't obviously from the state sector. And if you look at biotechnology and anything else, it's exactly the same. The U.S. is not unique in this respect, but it's overwhelming. So yeah, it's called the free market economy. but very dynamic, crucial state sector. And of course, the parts that are supposedly private are themselves centrally managed inside big, conglomerates, corporations. I mean, it has no. I mean, if Adam Smith saw it, he would regard it as I don't know what. Certainly not a free market economy. It has nothing to do with classical economics. I mean, if you think about it, every firm, like even a mom and pop grocery store, is a violation of market principles. In fact, it's called there's some fancy name for it in economics courses. The Coast story got a Nobel Prize for talking about how you break market principles when transaction costs get too high and so on. But anything that's centrally managed, even if it's like a family store, violates market principles. When you get to a big firm, it's a huge violation. So yes, it's called a free market system, but that's just a joke.
That's probably one of the mistakes that you make a pretty persuasive case for the media and the military and the money that the forces behind globalization have and everything. I was wondering if you could, because sometimes I just feel like driving my car over a bridge or something, and only living in the woods. But could you talk a little bit about like the weaknesses of?
Yeah, I mean, one of the weaknesses of the system is that the mostly reactionary governments of 80% of the world are opposed to it. That's a pretty strong force. Inside the industrial countries themselves, the majority is opposed. You take a look at the polls. Any country for which we have data on public attitudes, they've remained quite consistently opposed. And the business world understands that. Actually, sometimes they reveal it in interesting ways. When one of the public victories in this, along with the MIA, another one was blocking fast track. When the fast track legislation was blocked, because Congress was in favor of it, but they were forced to vote against it just by public pressure. I mean, people were breaking down the doors of congressional offices and stuff. The Wall Street Journal had an interesting comment on this. They said, look, fast track is what they call a no-brainer. It's so obviously good, we just ram it through. But they said the trouble is opponents of fast track have what they called an ultimate weapon. The population's against it. And unless we can keep it secret and ram it through in secret, the ultimate weapon will be unsheathed. Well, that's no reason for despair. You've got the ultimate weapon on your side and most of the rest of the world. That's a lot of power. He's telling me I got to go.